Hello and welcome to Lessons My Patients Taught Me. I'm Dr. Elliot Davidson, family doctor, coming to you from my home base in Solon, Ohio. And happily, we have made it to spring in northeastern Ohio. On this podcast, we talk about the lessons that medicine and the people we care for teach us over the course of a lifetime. Today's guest works in one of the most challenging, emotionally demanding, and profoundly important areas of healthcare, helping people reclaim their lives from addiction. I'm delighted to welcome my friend, Michael Pollak. Mike is a clinical counselor specializing in chemical dependency counseling, and for many years he's been helping individuals and families navigate one of the hardest roads a person can walk, the road to recovery. Mike earned his undergraduate degree in psychology from The Ohio State University and his master's in clinical counseling from Cleveland State University. He has multiple advanced certifications in chemical dependency counseling, and in 2014 he co-founded the Behavioral Wellness Group, where he serves as senior clinician and managing partner. That means Mike wears many, many hats: therapist, addiction specialist, business owner, mentor, crisis manager, and I suspect sometimes even firefighter. He helps clients through some of the darkest moments while also managing the day-to-day realities of running a complex behavioral health practice. And on top of all that, Mike is a devoted family man, a loyal friend, and a die-hard Buckeye fan. I can tell you from personal experience, if you needed help, Mike would gladly give you the shirt off his back, unless, of course, it's an Ohio State championship shirt. Mike, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here today.
Thanks, Elliot. I appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate the Ohio State reference. Being in Cleveland, we don't have too many of those championship type garb we can wear. I appreciate
absolutely
that out there. Thank you.
Got to take the championships where we can get them.
Exactly.
So let's just start off with a general question. What drew you to counseling in general and chemical dependency counseling in particular?
To be honest, the beginning is not very exciting because when I was in grad school, one of our professors said, if you want to make any money in this field, learn how to do substance abuse counseling, which sounded good to me in that moment. The bad part was my grandfather was an alcoholic and my mother, obviously a child of an alcoholic, and was also in the field as well. So we had some conversations about, as I've gone on with working with substance clients, I found that I really enjoyed working. It became less about the money part, but more about helping folks that deal with this disorder and realize that they can be understood and can get well and don't have to be judged as often as their families probably are.
Thanks for that. So describe your operation. What are the main things that you do at your behavioral wellness group and the conditions that you address?
Where we started is not where we've ended up. So when we started, it was just a couple of guys who wanted to open up a practice and have a couple of intensive outpatient programs. Since then, we have grown to, we're just shy of 50 clinicians now, with doing individual work, group therapy, intensive outpatient programming, psychiatry, psychological testing. We want to cover as many areas as we can. So I've made a concerted effort to hire folks who do what I can't do, which is not a high bar. So we've grown into people who can do EMDR therapy and trauma therapy and eating disorder, helping people get back to the workforce or on FMLA or disability. We are also one of the few outpatient practices who have HARF certification. Usually that's set for inpatient folks. And creating a practice that satisfies our mission statement of creating a comfortable practice in an outpatient setting.
50 clinicians, that is quite an operation to be the managing partner for. We're going to get into that in a little bit, but I find taking care of patients with chemical dependency a particularly challenging task. Many are not straightforward or honest. There's a lot of 2 steps forward, 1 step back moments. I wonder what are some of the lessons you've learned from your clients that help them be successful or help you be more patient with them or firm with them that helps them be successful?
It is. I mean, it's a 2-step forward, 2-step back process in many cases. And patience is a very important CE, not TS. patience is important with my folks, and realize that there's going to be relapse. There's going to be slips, and to not get on themselves for it. A lot of my folks, they like when I started the wording, but call them on their bullshit. They know they lie. They know what they try to get away with things, and they can be called on it. They actually appreciate that and are actually able to be more honest. Many folks who run into substance abuse clients, they run into a lot of lying, and my guess is you have as well, is that they lie about whether they viewed or what have you. And I've told them, you can lie to me. Go ahead. Where has that gotten you? Let's kind of look at what that's led you to. Let's talk about the road that led. That hasn't exactly worked out well for you. Why not be honest? Let's go with it. Even if you're honest about lying, we can do something with that. So I've found that to be really successful. That's been really helpful. And times I'll even err on the side of lying since they know they lie. And I'll say, look, I'm being irresponsible if I don't ask you about this, whatever that may be. One anecdote is I had kid in his late 20s. Isn't it funny how we call them kids? We're in our late 20s, they weren't kids, but I was thinking they were kids. And his father, he was getting off of opiates. His father was holding up his money for him. And during a session I had with him and his father, he was demanding his money back as it is. I'm like, wait a minute. Why do you really want this money? Are you really going to do something productive with this? And knew that he was going to do something silly or impulsive with it. And he stopped the conversation. Instead of going with the demand, it is yours, sure. But what are you going to do with it? That was out there. He stopped. So I think it's just knowing it's the lying part and the slips, and they're going to happen. Let's talk about them. And it ends up being a way to reduce harm because they're not worsening the situation.
Yeah, sometimes the lying is not always tied to a chemical dependency. They may be embarrassed about something. I had a patient the other day whose urine, we did a urine drug screen. His urine was cold, clearly not a correct urine specimen coming out of the body. He sheepishly admitted that he was having trouble urinating because of a prostate problem, and he added a little bit of water from the sink to the urine that he produced, not because he was trying to somehow adulterate the urine, but he was trying to create enough of a specimen that it would be useful to evaluate, but actually in the process making it impossible to evaluate it. So a specimen that wouldn't be usable, and had to be educated that this was not the correct way to do it.
And that friend of mine had a phenomenal line about stuff like that. She said that if it wasn't so infuriating, their lying is almost admirable.
Yeah. I mean, so this one was fairly innocuous. It was obvious, and it's surprising that what they think we can't catch. On another matter related to this, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous that have been adopted by many chemical dependency programs have a strong reliance on spirituality. There are some clients, patients, whatever, that relate well to that. There are others that do not. And I wonder how you deal with clients that don't feel that connection.
Yeah, because the ones who do it, go to AA and that's going to work. But I've come across a lot of folks who come in and say they don't want to go to AA because it's too religious for them, and they're not religious. And the tough part about that is the way the 12 steps were originally put together have kind of gotten moved over time as where people have gotten a hold of them. So my comment to them initially about their spirituality is first finding out where they are, and then validating that we don't know what the answer is. We don't know what the truth is. None of us can arrogantly say, and I want to use that term on purpose, that we know what it is. We believe. I have a belief. You probably have a belief. I think a lot of people are listening. They have a belief. We don't know. And so I want to validate that with them, that whatever they believe may very well be correct. But the idea is in the program, and I'm a fan of the program. There's other alternatives for people who struggle. There's Smart Recovery, which is more of a cognitive behavioral type recovery program. There's Refuge Recovery, which is kind of a Buddhist mindful feel to it. There's other that are religious. There are others who are more religious, such as Rational Recovery or Celebrate Recovery, that have a Christian feel to it. If I go back to the 12-step component, it says to connect with a power greater than them. And I heard someone in an old video describe that as just a power greater than you, but it does not have to be a spiritual kind, be something that's outside of you and greater than you. The premise is that if the power is within you, you would have solved this by now. So it's not. But you know it's somewhere because other people are using it. You look around, you see a bunch of sobriety, so it's somewhere. Let's find out what that is. So the connection with people at meeting, and we found to be very valuable. And that can be a power greater than themselves because it's something outside of them and greater than them. And I'd say, don't use coffee cup, don't use a doorknob, because A, those are by nature beneath you. And B, you have that at home. You don't need meetings for that. So getting around other sober people could be a power greater than themselves. But it does not have to be God if they're not there. Understandable. And also the program has a component about we the agnostic. We weren't sure, which talks about ways to navigate the program around that.
Yeah, that's helpful. Is chemical dependency a disease, a personality flaw? Is it genetic, bad luck, some environmental factor, or is it some combination of these? What's your approach to this question?
Yeah, I've thought of all of those, those different avenues over 30 years of doing this. And can't believe I said that out loud. And I found that if I approach one, I've approached it with curious if it's a personality flaw, and found that those who took it as a personality flaw, they found shame in themselves that they've something up and they can't get past when they've looked at it as like bad luck or environmental factors. That's the way to blame. I can blame my environment. I can blame just being unlucky. I can blame my family. I can blame these things. And then they continue going out with it. There's been some studies that has some genetic overlap because there's a lot of cases where alcoholism runs in families or drug addiction runs in families or addiction runs in families. There can be some with that. But most of all, I've gone with the disease component because those who have taken it as a disease are more likely to get better. I equate it to someone has cancer. I don't blame them for it. It's not their fault. But if they don't take the treatment necessary, if they don't do no radiation or whatever is recommended, then I'll hold them responsible. So someone's drinking, using drugs, gambling, I don't blame them for having that illness. But there's treatment out there. You're not going to follow the treatment, then I'm going to hold you responsible. And so I take it as a disease or treat it like that while still holding people responsible for taking the treatment necessary to get well.
Yeah, that makes sense. How do you help families navigate that chemically dependent person? That's very, very difficult to handle. Questions like, why can't he just stop? Why can't she stop at one? What about what I've been dealing with the drinking? And how do you deal with those kinds of questions?
Families mean well. They really want the person to stop. They really want to be helpful. But they say things that end up being a setup and they don't realize it, or they get set up by the chemically dependent person because that's how they get their way and find ways to continue to use. So navigating or helping with the family when they say things like, why can't he just stop? And I do want to emphasize, I'm using he as the short for the pronouns. I know he, she, they. I just want to keep it short. It's not that I'm trying to be pronoun insensitive. But when they say, why can't he just stop? I said, is the person, this person, are they dumb? And of course, they're going to say, of course, they've shown aptitudes all over. I'm like, well, then don't you think they thought of why they can't just stop? Maybe it's crossed their mind, and there's more than just, hey, just give it up. So getting them on board with the thought of this, haven't been able to, can be really actually validating for the family because now there's an understanding why this is actually a difficult thing. Well, dependency is a primary drive when people are really hooked on substances. So the only way a layperson might understand is we take away one of their primary drives. I'm not going to talk about something like breathing and food. You need that to live. But we're adults. Let's just say if you're told if you have sex again, you could die. Okay, we can get on board for that a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month. But after a little bit, we're going to get a little antsy, and we're going to start either acting toward that or acting out at some point. So that's what they're up against. They're told about something that actually has become a primary drive for them. They can't do it anymore. That's just hard. They could do it simply, they would. And to have validate for the family, I get that they mean to be helpful, but the question, for example, if you've been drinking, is a setup. They don't realize it. Setup. They're really just trying to monitor the person that they love. But if they say yes, well, there's a problem. And if they say no, the family member doesn't believe them. The idea is that they don't is to not necessarily ask if they've been drinking if you're not prepared to accept the answer, but to pay attention to the behaviors that they're trained to lie. They're going to lie, like we talked about earlier, to know that challenging those lies or not being trusted is part of this. And the chemically dependent person is going to have to know that they're not going to be trusted. They're going to have to earn it. It's not going to come quickly. So it's a tough thing. Definitely in the
I do what we call MAT, medication-assisted treatment, generally Suboxone for those with a narcotic addiction. I believe in the concept of harm reduction. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking to keep people alive and functioning better. What do you think about that concept, and what are some of the ways that it plays out in your work with the folks you work with?
We've talked about that a couple of times, and I love the idea of harm reduction because for the longest time, especially with opiates, it was an all or nothing kind of thing. So I like that idea to give them the premise that they can move in that direction. However, is making sure that they're on board with you. How many times have you thought you've been working harder than your client? And this is what we run into. I think in sort of our conversation, we run into that. It can be very frustrating. Acknowledging that part, that as long as we're not working harder than them, that's all for it. But I love the idea that it can help. And as long as people are taking it as they're taking it and not coming back with, Doc, I ran out of my Suboxone again. We kind of run into that.
Yeah, there are a lot of different degrees you can take this to. You can take it to giving them their medication early. There are places where you can get clean needles. There are places that you can go to inject yourself with medication or street drugs in a safe way, and you can agree or disagree with all these different approaches. It does tend to keep people alive.
It does.
But it does also enable in some way.
Right. And it does support, at least if they're alive, they have a chance of getting better. But, it's also putting a lot of resources into somebody who doesn't have an interest in getting better. And that's what really gets tricky. So I admit I'm far more of a fan of it than not, but I know I run into that a lot where I want this more than they do.
Right. Now, on that topic, what are some of the joys and challenges of being a chemical dependency counselor? Start with the joys.
Well, it's kind of funny because I was taking a sip of water in my cup, and I don't know if you can see it. One of my clients got this for me. It says, if at first you don't succeed, try doing what Mike told you to do in the first place.
That will work. That will definitely work.
So they're fun to work with. These are people who, they're funny. They have a very off-color sense of humor, which I enjoy being around because it's honest. And once they start realizing there's people out there who aren't using, who can actually get them, they feel better. They don't blow smoke at me. They don't tell me I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread, which does happen with other therapists. They challenge me. They question. They put up a fight. I love that because it means that they're as invested in getting well as I am. They're getting. They don't look at me as this wise state, which I'm not. Never claimed to be, but they challenge that. They question it. I think I need to stop for one second. Yeah. Thank you. The challenge that I have, or one of the challenges that I have, is that I'm not in recovery myself. I'm not a recovering alcoholic. I'm not a recovering drug addict. I don't want to, and I don't want to bring that up and act as if I am. I kind of equate it to, there was a time, another anecdote, but I was helping people get off their pain medication, and have to do this and stop using, go to meetings and so on, and directing the way kind of the book would say. And then I had my own pain, and that was a game. I mean, pain changes mood, it changes motivation, it changes a lot of things. I had to change. I wanted to change my approach at that point, so really understanding what it was that I was really directing people to do. And when I don't have a shared experience, it's tougher. So I have to let them know I'm not going to say I know how you. I don't. I can appreciate what you've gone through. I've been doing this. I made a career of this for 30 years to help people get sober. But I'm not going to insult you. That's to say I know what the early part of recovery feels like. Because I don't.
Yeah, yeah. One of the joys I have in taking care of the folks with on the medication-assisted treatment side is just these folks have struggled so much in their lives. They've gone through hell and back, and to see them on track and living their lives and functioning, they are so appreciative of the help that they're getting, and the fact that they're on track. It is a very gratifying work.
When I get it, it's terrific. When people can come up to me, and, when I get an email years later. Like, when I run into somebody who I'm not, I don't acknowledge noting them because I can't, but when they come up to me, I just, so I am, I'm sober 2 years now. I'm sober 5 years now. I'm sober 10 years now. Saw an old client of mine that I saw about 25 years ago that after she got sober, she got into the field and, we connected and she's sober, I think, 26 years and just retired from it. So it just, I it's just a great, great feeling when that happens.
Now, I know you've had some challenges running your business like most small business owners. What lessons can you share for those that still want the independence of owning their own business?
Other than don't do it.
Don't be crazy like me.
Yeah, it was interesting because I always, when I, in my past practice, questioned the owner because he was doing some things I didn't like, and it seemed like he was taking money he shouldn't be taking, or pushing this route, pushing this and pushing this, and my business partner and I now we were in the same practice at the time. We just questioned a lot of it to the point we got so angry and eventually let our own. And over time, we've understood that why he was doing why he was trying to change percentages, or why we didn't do that, but we understood why. So over time, and I had to pay attention to what he'd done and realize that when I make decisions, people aren't going to like them. It's just, it's kind of the nature of the beast. They're just not going to like what I, what I have to, what I change, or what any policies I have to implement. I understand why corporations implement certain policies. As you know, my wife is in human resources, thank God, because she's talked me through a lot of things that I wanted to do that I shouldn't do, or everything. Also, I realized that money isn't evil here. People have a hard time going after money, going after the financial component of this. And I don't know if you saw the movie Moneyball, but there's a quote by Jonah Hill in that in that movie, where he says it's not the money, but it's what the money says, that they're worth it. And what I took from that, as far as my practice goes, or any other clinician that works with me, that when somebody is paying their copay or paying their deductible, they're letting you know they value what you do. They're telling you that what you are doing is important. And when they're not paying it, they're saying the opposite, and they're not valuing what's going on. So when I have new people, bringing on new clinicians who are younger and teaching them how we do things and how to get money and things like that, is to say, when you go after the copays, to address it as, when you pay this is how you are valuing our relationship. And if you don't, you're telling me you're not.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to have a copay for most things because it encourages people to be invested in that, show up, for appointments and things like that. So when you make things zero, people don't value it as much.
But I think that's been probably one of the biggest problems with Medicaid is, we can't charge them for a no-show and they don't have a copay. And even if the copay was $3, have them have some accountability to it. I think it's really, I'm with you. I think it's really important to just have that value, but they don't ask me.
They don't ask me either. Now, so the title of this podcast is Lessons My Patients Taught Me. What is one lesson that your clients continue to teach you over and over again?
Well, a couple. One is to call them on their stuff, like I was talking about earlier. But I think to back off being judgmental. That's the biggest one, is backing off judgment. When I first started this, and I was an intern, I was in a group, and one of the clients openly said, I don't want to talk in front of Mike because it feels as though he judges me. And I was in my late 20s at the time, and I was like, really? And I was so defensive.
You're judging me now.
Right. How dare you? So I took a look at that. And then within that same internship, a few months later, somebody else said to me, I don't like you. So I had to really reevaluate how I approach things. And it turns out clearly I was wrong in the way I was approaching, or at least did some heavy adjustments. So backing off a judgment is a big, big deal, because they're going through enough. They don't need people shaming them. And to let them know, listen, you meant to drink alcohol or gamble or for a relationship like others do. Got hooked on it. And so we kind of have to go a different route. But I want you to take that route. I don't use the term alcoholic, a drug addict, gambling addict. I don't use those terms on purpose. I may have in here a little bit sort of colloquial terms, but generally speaking, I don't do that. I let them know this, and I said, okay, so that's the last person I did an evaluation on. He was here because he blacked out repeatedly and had a big issue with his wife. And so drinking has caused a problem with your wife, and drinking has caused a problem with your brain because you're not supposed to black out. Drinking has caused a problem with the friends that you're around because he talked to me about some of his behaviors. And if it's caused a problem in your marriage and with your health and a problem with your friends, that's a drinking problem. Let's address this as a drinking problem. Okay, if it didn't cause problems, I wouldn't have met you. So let's address this as a drinking problem. And again, that gets off the deck. That's much more factual than it is judgment.
That's fascinating, because you have to find a way to hold them accountable without sounding judgmental. And that sounds pretty challenging to me. I mean, that's almost a paradox.
Well, true. It's kind of it is a trick, but if it's what they want, if they said that this is what they want as far as treatment goes, then that's what I'm going to hold them to. So if they said, I got to stop drinking. Okay. There's a lot that goes with that. This is not an easy thing, or else I certainly wouldn't have a job. So let's go after what it is that's going to get you to stop drinking, because there's a lot of different behaviors that go with that. We were talking earlier about lying. That's a common one. So being honest, committing to that. I don't know if you've read the book, The Naked Mind by Annie Grace, but she's a recovering alcoholic, but she wrote a book based on how to do that without going to AA. So I thought it was important that I learned about that. And she was brilliant, but she recognized that a lot of sobriety is about commitment and belief. If you commit to this and believe things will get well, the likelihood of you getting well is much stronger. I mean, that's what the steeple effect is the way that is. So, she's made a living based on people that get committed to being sober. And if it's part of getting into an AA program or smart recovery, great. It's being around other people. Believing you can get well and committing to it is a great deal. And the belief part was really another anecdote. But she talked about how she was giving a seminar when she was maybe 6 or 7 years sober. She gave a seminar out of town, and she took herself to dinner afterward. And she saw 4 businessmen walk into the restaurant after work, still on their phone, still grumpy, still answering emails, on their phone, and sitting at the table, not saying a word, just email, text. Then the bottle of wine shows up. The phones go down, and these guys start to get silly. What she had noticed, though, was that the bottle of wine hadn't been opened yet. It was the belief that alcohol was going to calm them down that allowed them to get silly. They didn't drink anything yet. So if they can believe that they can get well, if they believe that they can have fun being sober, and I've made the comments, you have to find a way to have fun being sober. Otherwise, this isn't going to. Not the cheerleader. You do it. No, you have to find a way to have fun being sober. And the belief that you can do it. And a lot of people have acknowledged that when they've gone to the bar, they've already started to have fun even before they've taken drink one. And so it is, updating that belief is really a real important thing.
Well, that makes so much sense. Well, Mike, this has been an important and moving conversation for me. What strikes me most in listening to you is that addiction is really far more about sobriety. It's about dignity. It's about rebuilding trust and restoring families and helping people believe that relapse is not the end of their story. Your work reminds me that healing often happens in inches, not miles, and that progress is sometimes measured not by perfection, but by persistence. One of the deepest lessons our patients teach us is that human beings are remarkably resilient, even when they're struggling with the most broken places. And in addiction medicine, perhaps more than anywhere, we are reminded that recovery begins when someone is seen not as their worst mistake, but as a whole person, still worthy of hope. Thank you, Mike, for the work that you do, and thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today. And thanks to our listeners for joining us for another episode of Lessons My Patients Taught Me. I'm Dr. Elliot Davidson, reminding you that sometimes the people who seem most lost have the most to teach us about courage and humility and grace. And remember, stay healthy out there.
The preceding podcast contained discussions of medical cases where names and identifying details were altered to protect the privacy of individuals. The views and opinions expressed were those of the individual speakers and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any affiliated institutions or organizations. This podcast was for entertainment purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice.